Hi, everybody. This is Bevan Bucheister. I'm the chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission, and I'm calling this meeting to order at 7:02. Welcome. I just want to take a roll call for the members. So for members, can you please unmute yourself and tell us your name and what ward you are representing? We'll start with Ward 1. I'm Bevan and I'm Ward 1. Are there any more from Ward 1? Not sure. Okay, Ward 2.
Bill O'Leary, Ward 2.
Yes. And Ann Stevenson, Ward 2.
Okay. Ward 3. Do we have anybody from Ward 3? All right, Ward 4. Ward 5.
Jeremy Hansen, Ward 5.
And Ward 6.
Randy Rowell, Ward 6.
Hi, Randy. Ward 7.
Allison Colden, Ward 7.
Great. And Ward 8. Ward 8. Okay. All right, thanks. Well, we do have enough members to vote on our, oh, actually, I need to move to introduction of guests. So we do have Eric Lashinsky here today, and he joined us last month as well. And he's going to talk about planning, comprehensive planning. That's at the end of the meeting. And we also have Alderwoman Ellie Tierney here with us from Ward 1 to discuss a resolution you had, but I think it's cold, right?
Yeah, but I haven't been here for a while, so
yeah,
I
okay.
would have come anyway. So.
Great. And
yeah.
you're a member of the Environmental Matters Committee, so welcome.
Yeah.
And also I see Kate. Kate just joined us. Kate Bohannon from your Ward 8, right?
Ward 2, yeah.
Ward 2, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Right, 8's Eastport, sorry. All right, so welcome guests. Our next order of business is to vote on our January 2021 minutes. I hope you all had time to read them. I know they were sent a few days ago, so I had time to read them, and I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Or were there any corrections to the minutes?
Nope, nothing.
Okay. All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting, January meeting.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Aye.
any opposed? Nay. All right, minutes from January 2021 are approved. The next order of business was a discussion or a proposal we came up with to handle issues that crop up. They arise between meetings where we don't have the opportunity to take a position on them. It doesn't happen frequently, but what it does, it's kind of important. And we came up with a proposal. I don't know, can I share? I can share my screen, right? I'll share my screen to let you all see it. I think this is it. Okay, so I'm sharing now. All right, so the proposal was to use this under limited circumstances when an issue crops up and it's going to be heard before another board or commission, a deciding board and commission. We're just a advisory board or commission, but it's going to be heard from them before the AEC can meet and vote on a position. So what we propose to do is allow the chair and vice chair to take a position for the AEC based on certain principles that we support and we operate by and that we vote to adopt. And so those general principles are preserving as much forest as possible, saving specimen trees, planting replacement trees with a largest diameter at breast height as possible when they need to be replaced, replanting using native plants and trees, minimizing impervious surface, maximizing treatment of stormwater, not overdeveloping a lot to allow for a balance of natural and man-made features, and maximizing public access, especially when a development is adjacent to water. So those are the general principles that we are always looking for in development projects. So wanted to throw it out to you all and ask if there was anything else, other principles. But, okay, go ahead.
And considering or building equity into all environmental decisions.
All right. Were there any discussion on that? That's something we have advocated for.
I would say environmental and
Equity and access.
planning. I guess environmental development, planning decisions, environmental/planning/development. Discuss amongst yourselves.
Environmental. Well, that looks like environmental development, so maybe that's not the right phrasing, so.
I meant environmental/development/planning decisions.
Oh, okay,
Yeah. You guys can discuss, see what you think.
okay,
You can just put a comma after
Yeah,
environmental
right.
development and planning decisions.
right. All right, and do I hear agreement with that principle, or the other general principles too? And also open for discussion on the whole idea as well. Go ahead. Is that Ann? No, it's Allison. Allison.
Thank you. Well, first I'll just second, I support adding in the equity bullet point there. One I also wanted to bring forward for consideration is coastal habitats and coastal resilience. Things like wetlands and other coastal habitats that contribute to our resilience to climate change.
So what about coastal habitats and resilience? Like preserving coastal habitat or?
Yeah, prioritizing the preservation and conservation of coastal habitats.
All right, and I didn't put prioritizing on there. I just put preserving coastal habitat and resilience because this is our
Priority list. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So any discussion on that other general principle? ahead.
No, but I'm looking at something in here. We have not overdeveloping a lot to
Mhm.
allow for a balance. I would get rid of a lot. Just say
Oh.
not overdeveloping to allow for a balance of natural and man-made features.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you might want to include maximizing open space, green space.
Yeah, and when I was put that not overdeveloping, I was talking about like a parcel, not just in general. So, I mean, because we look at, we review development proposals, so we're looking at parcels, but
Well, say then
we're
say
looking
that.
at the whole city too,
Say not overdeveloping parcels then
Yeah,
to allow. And then I was just gonna say, when you said preserving as much forest as possible, I think, this group has always been about preserving as much contiguous forest as possible, because that's really important.
all right, but where a forest is not contiguous, I mean,
We
I
wanna-
want to limit us to contiguous forests,
Right.
So I
No,
think
no, I know.
we can
Maybe-
preserve contiguous forest or any kind of forest if we just say.
Yeah, that's true.
forest,
That's
you know?
true. That's true.
Maybe say forest and tree cover, forest and tree cover.
And tree cover, yeah, because you guys have got into that with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, right,
that last issue you're dealing with last month.
yeah. Tree canopy, was it? Tree canopy?
Canopy or cover.
Yeah, well, same thing, I think, right? Right.
What about preserving open space or green space?
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, and so while you're thinking and looking at those principles, I just wanted to say that, when we use this, what I'm proposing is when we use this, we will also notify the AEC in advance by sending them the position letter, and we will be voting on that position, formally on the next at the following AC meeting, and we'll also specify in the position letter that it's the chair and vice chair that are taking this position on behalf of the board, and the full AEC has not yet voted on this position. So just to make it clear. So any comment on that structure? And also, oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Evan.
could I just make a comment? And this goes back
Sure.
to my construction days when we wrote qualifications. Because your objective is to say that, you know, two people can speak for the commission, it isn't so much to define what you're going to talk about. So I'm wondering if you could possibly say, you know, leave it open-ended. These general principles include, but are not
Yeah.
limited to the following.
Yeah,
Good
right.
suggestion.
Because then you're not
Right.
locked in, and that's, it's not a legal document that defines a scope of work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, if something pops up and it's not in that
yeah,
general principles document, yeah.
yeah, it was always a catch-all in construction.
Yeah.
And so Bevan, Joel from the Office of Law here. This process that you are vetting right now has been approved by the Office of Law. We believe that this is exactly what you guys should be doing. And if you can't get together to have the meeting and the chair and the vice chair, for example, issue a statement, we just ask that it be ratified at the next meeting so that
Okay.
all the members can come together at the next meeting, and the chair and the vice just says, hey, we sent a letter out. This was our position. And then everyone says we ratified it, the opinion of, or whatever the case may be, ratify the action after the action's taken. So that way it becomes an official action of the commission.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Thanks, Joelle.
I was just wondering about workforce development. If we were going for nature-based careers, we want to touch on that, or is that something else?
You know, I don't know if that's a general principle, but let's discuss it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be encouraging, encouraging green, encouraging the green economy and businesses and jobs related to renewable energy might be a way of stating it.
For underrepresented, maybe throw something like that for them in there too, a little equity in there.
Yeah.
We already have equity in there.
Yeah.
In a different bullet, supporting green economy, green jobs, environmental education. It's another one we talk about a lot.
Yeah. All right, any comments on that one? Is everybody okay with that one as a general principle?
Maybe, is it okay to mention under-engaged populations as a target?
Uh-huh.
Bevan,
Hi, Paul.
hello. First of all, I apologize. Last month I was not on Zoom, only phone, so I had no visuals on whose hand was up to speak. But in regards to this, Anne Arundel Community College, this is not going to happen right away. This might be 18 months or perhaps longer. But Anne Arundel is constructing a new trade building, and it's public-private partnership. It's 95% funded. Their first three they're working on is law enforcement, HVAC, and some larger trades that are much bigger now. And there's a demand. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs a year filled in those. So they've purposely built this building to bring the training, workforce development, and they know further down the road it's going to be renewable energy and 3D printing.
Right. Yeah, they're a big center for workforce development, the community college, but it doesn't have to do with this principle, because I really want to stick on this and let's get this,
No, but I just wanted to bring it up while we're on this topic.
Okay.
So Randy, further down the road over the next couple of years, that would be an area where I think they would be hungry to bring people into workforce development, and they've got a much bigger, they've got much more capacity than we could ever do. So I look at them as a way to really get something done.
Yeah. All right, thanks. And we can explore that further, maybe offline, but right now I don't want to get behind. I know my Ann's going to be my timekeeper. But I want to just, get the commission's view on this position taking. Are you ready to vote on it? If we are, I'm ready to vote on it tonight. If we are, somebody can, I can call for a vote, or are you guys comfortable with the general principles, the idea of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. So if we put on this, will this continue on for future, when we're off the board, people can continue to operate this way?
When you're off the board, what do you?
Like is this a new thing forever is what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, this will be adopting the procedures for us to take positions. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And
like,
then,
when I'm off the board next year, well, not the chair next year anyway. It's the board's procedure, not mine.
continuing on. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I thought this was great. Really clear.
Yeah,
You
okay.
guys can choose to amend it,
Yeah.
in the
Right.
future, with a vote, but the board, obviously, whoever is on the board at the time that you decide to amend it, if you choose to.
Right. Okay, so are there any other questions? All right, you got, if you're ready for a vote, I think I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? All right, hearing none opposed, that measure passes. Thanks, everybody. I think this will keep us moving and prevent us from having to call emergency meetings in the middle of the month that are really hard to schedule.
And if I could just chime in as we transition to Jackie's briefing on Hawkins Cove, I think part of what Paul's getting at, and also Randy, is that these general principles are part of our priorities for 2021, or it's, like sort of, we're halfway there and drafting them up. And I think we'll have some clear projects and next steps as we sort of solidify those and move forward. So this feels like the 2021 goals feel like less of a lift now that we've done this. At least to me.
All right, thanks, Anne. Yeah. And also I've got a lot of windows open, so if you have your hand up and I don't see you, you're just gonna have to chime in. So it's hard to monitor all these different documents. But yeah, so back to the agenda. So let me open it up to Jackie Gild to give us a briefing on Hawkins Cove Improvement Project. But first, I did want you to feel free to mention what was in the news today about the city and the lawsuit. Oh, you're on mute. I think you're on mute, Jackie.
All right. It was in the news yesterday too.
Okay.
In the city. Yeah, so it's been in the news quite a bit. And NPR actually interviewed me today too. So the city has on Monday filed a lawsuit against 26 oil and gas companies for the damage caused by climate change. The damage that they caused. These are producers, promoters, and sellers of oil and gas and coal products. So alleging that they knew about the causes of, they knew that their products cause climate change adverse climate change consequences. They withheld information and in fact promoted their own pseudoscience to try to refute it and confuse the public. They intentionally engaged in a campaign to mislead the public and public policymakers, and therefore policymakers and consumers did not take the actions that they could have taken earlier to help mitigate the effects of climate change. And now local governments are left holding the tab to pay for the consequences that we must now all deal with. And it shouldn't be the taxpayers that pay for everything we need to do now for climate change to combat it and mitigate it, but rather the companies that caused the problems. That's the gist of it. There are 24 other lawsuits filed nationwide by states, cities, and counties. They're individual lawsuits. Ours is an individual lawsuit. And most of them there's been no final decisions in any lawsuits yet. And so no one has settled. No one has been successful at trial. They have not gone to trial. As you can imagine, especially the attorneys on this group, the oil and gas and coal companies have tied up these lawsuits with pretrial motions and procedural matters and trying to remove them to federal court where they feel they will be more successful. All of these claims, current claims, have been filed in state court on state claims.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Did anybody have any
You're welcome.
questions? I know she's limited in what she can say. We're active lawsuits, but
So what happens now? They have to respond to your suit,
Yes,
waiving the.
yes.
And do they have a certain time frame?
Yes, they do have a certain time in which to respond to their our claims. And we've already been hit with, as we imagine, with PIA requests. There will be discovery propounded on both sides. And so before there'll be many years before anyone gets to trial on this issue.
Do you know who put that together for the city, or who's head that up?
Well, the law firm that's representing us is Scher Edling, and they're out of San Francisco. They're a boutique plaintiff environmental firm, and they have, I think, 22 of the 25 cases. And Joelle's nodding his head. Yes, that's correct. If you're asking how we develop this, is that what you're asking, Randy?
I'm saying who within the city government has been the lead or the head or the one putting this all together.
Right. So I developed, did a lot of the research on this litigation and developed, my recommendations and provided all the background on it, shared that with the mayor and the city manager, the city attorney, and the chief of staff. We had discussions about whether or not we should pursue it. Should we look more into it, which we decided to look into it further. Then the city attorney and I interviewed the law firms that there's basically 2 law firms nationwide that are handling this type of litigation, and Scher Edling by far we thought was the most qualified. Scher Edling's also handling the city of Baltimore's lawsuit. The city of Baltimore filed against the same companies in 2018. And so we felt that Scher Edling, not only because they have the most experience in handling the most lawsuits and have been successful on all the pretrial motions, for the most part, but they also are familiar with Maryland law and with the issues that we face in Maryland because of the representation of Baltimore. So it's very cost efficient for them to do it. Now, again, speaking about costs, Scher Edling is taking this case on a contingent fee basis, which means that the city does not pay for attorney's fees in this case. We just have soft costs, which are the time of our Office of Law in reviewing complaints, speaking with Scher Edling about strategy, reviewing motion strategy and motions that will be filed, and from me and other departments as necessary to gather information as needed for Scher Edling to pursue this litigation, and for all of us in the city to respond to discovery requests with the help of the Office of Law.
all right, thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome.
So moving on to your next item, and that's the Hawkins Cove Improvement Project.
Right. Okay. So many of you are probably aware that the city is engaged in pursuing restoration of Hawkins Cove, which is located, it's right off of Spa Creek, around the corner from the Truxton Park boat ramp. It's on the other side of Primrose Street and behind the HACA headquarters building, downhill from it. So the Shearwater community, if you're facing the water, the Shearwater condominiums are up to your right. There's another condo complex right there too, and the name escapes me at the moment. And to your left are the Spa Cove apartments. And it's this watershed drains, well, it's the Spa Creek watershed, but it's about a 92-acre area that actually drains eventually to Hawkins Cove. So there is a long history of accretion of sediment. I mean, there's about 10 feet of sediment in Hawkins Cove. So it's pretty impaired. There's not a lot of aquatic life. You really don't see healthy submerged aquatic vegetation there. The Spa Creek Conservancy did completed a regenerative stream conveyance system a couple of years ago from the tributary that flows into Hawkins Cove. So that is taking care of a lot of the sediment and filtering and absorbing pollution and creating a natural floodplain in that area. So the sediment that's in the cove is largely historical at this point in time. Spot Creek Conservancy also put in a couple of rain gardens below. There's a long driveway that goes down from Hacka that goes down to Hawkins Cove. There at the bottom, there's a couple of rain gardens there. They did not finish the little channel that comes off of those rain gardens that goes into Hawkins Cove. So we may address that as well. So what the city has been doing, I'm applying for a grant that's due March 4th. So please bear with me if I do not respond to you guys right away. I'm a little swamped right now, along with other issues. So as part of that, before we submitted the grant, we decided to do some community listening sessions and do a lot of community outreach. So we prepared videos, we have website information, we presented at the Ward 8 Town Hall. We held 2 community listening sessions. There are signs up with a QR code to get more information. We reached out to the Eastport Elementary, to USNA, to Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, and other housing complexes with flyers. We have HACA involved as well as a partner, to try to get as much information from the community about what their questions and concerns are about the Cove, but also how they would like to see it being utilized, how they would like to use it. There's a lot of people that walk back there, that walk their dogs or run through the area. It's used a lot as a connection between one side of Eastport and Truxtun Park. And there is a little bridge that was put over the little creek there because people were walking through the rocks there. So that's been an improvement that's already been made. So we were open to everything and anything that people had to suggest. And we developed a basic consensus and are putting that into our grant proposal, which is that the community really wants the natural setting to remain. They don't want the area overdeveloped and any hardscaping going in there. They like that it's a nice area for quiet enjoyment, but they do see that it could obviously, from an ecological uplift perspective, there's a lot to improve there. On the land side, there's a lot of invasives. There's some trash. The trees that are there are being choked with ivy. Some are just being held up by English ivy at this point. It's dead wood. But so on the land side of it, we're hearing, some seating areas, maybe a picnic table would be nice to have some quiet enjoyment there, read a book, have lunch. The pier has a couple of missing boards, and that was also requested that we repair that. Right now, you can't really pull a boat up to the pier or launch a kayak or a canoe or a paddleboard there because of the sediment. It goes out about 20 feet at least, and it's deep. So what we'll probably do from the environmental side of things is remove the failing bulkhead and put in a living shoreline, which would cover up a lot of the sediment. We might need to extend the dock out so that you could actually use it for fishing or tie up a canoe or something there, and then design the living shoreline in a way that there is an area where you could launch a kayak, a paddleboard, etc. So that we're building an ecological uplift and habitat restoration, as well as providing water access and connectivity to the trail system. That was another point that was raised over and over again. The trails are great. We're glad that you've put down some bark mulch and put the bridge over there, but they could be marked better. They could be wider. They could be safer for people of all ages, especially seniors. It's kind of slick and muddy in places. And there's also some really wet areas, which brought up a point that perhaps we should divert part of the trail that's closer to Primrose Street a little bit more uphill and out of the wetland area and the floodplain to not only make it safer and less boggy, but to protect the wetlands that are coming back now thanks to the Spot Creek Conservancy's project that they put in. So again, my deadline to submit is March 4th, probably here by the end of the month from the trust. The trust loves this project. They've been out there a couple of times with me with all kinds of suggestions. And so if we get funding, it'll probably be towards the, I think it's June is when they're saying we couldn't do anything till July down there. But what I'm applying for is to continue the community outreach and develop a conceptual plan So once we have a concept plan that people could actually look at and visualize what we're proposing there, I think we're going to get a lot more input. But we will continue the community outreach. We really need to hear from the people that live in Eastport and the surrounding area, and also from everybody else in Annapolis. And then we'll probably have enough funding to do the living shoreline portion of the project, and may need to apply for additional funding to address the trails and the landward improvements that we would make.
Mhm.
Any questions?
So Jackie, you mentioned there's like 10 feet of sediment in there, and I've been down there and looked at it, and the pier goes out, like a normal pier does, and then there's no water under the pier. It's all sediment.
Right.
So is dredging part of the plan there? And I'm just like, you said something about doing a living shoreline on top of the sediment, but is dredging in the plan either in the out years or,
Yeah. So as you know, when you put in a living shoreline, there's often dirt removal and dirt moving around,
Yeah.
some of the sediment will be addressed. And usually you cut back when you remove the bulkhead, you cut back into the shoreline, a bit, and then you go out a bit. So a living shoreline total is about 30 feet wide. Some of it moves landward and some of it goes out into the water. And so some of that sediment will be addressed during the construction phase, but probably not all of it. There's a lot of interest from some of the communities along Spot Creek, especially those with their own piers, community piers or private piers. And the mayor is very interested in bringing a water taxi into that area, but you can only go so far down the channel before it becomes very shallow very quickly. So that will probably be a future project, especially because the trust does not fund dredging at all. We would have to use our own funds or use some other funds. However, the county is supposed to do the dredging for the city. And I spoke to Public Works in the county a couple of years ago, trying to figure out, I was asking about Weems Creek because they have a sediment problem there, and many of the waterfront property owners can no longer use their piers there, and you can't really navigate back there very well. And I was told that none of the city waters are on their priority list. So that is some advocacy work that we will need to do with the county to move up some of our creeks and rivers.
Okay.
And this might be one of the projects that we pressure them to address.
Okay, so they do dredging in-house, or do they contract it out?
I think they contract it out, but apparently the county does own dredging equipment as well. So they may do some of it, they may contract some of that. I'm not sure of the particulars on it, but they control the dredging for the city.
Okay.
We do not have the capacity to do it.
Right. And are there any other questions about this project? So this is the planning grant. We don't have a conceptual design. This is to get money to keep doing the outreach and create a conceptual design, right?
And construct the living shoreline.
Okay.
This living shoreline, I know when I say living shoreline, a lot you guys see dollar signs because some of them are extremely expensive to construct. This one, because it's in a cove and it's very protected, you don't have a lot of wave action. So we don't have a lot of need for a buffering so much. Now it will be a resiliency project. It will protect the shoreline and it will absorb nutrients and sediment.
Okay.
But because you don't need the rock, and the rock is where it gets really expensive, this is a much cheaper living shoreline. So we'd actually be able to construct the living shoreline portion of it.
Okay. Any questions for Jackie?
Jackie, do you want us to write a letter in support of the grant?
Yes, that was one of my asks tonight was, thank you for reminding me, that part of the trust application is to identify who your partners will be and how they partner with you. And I see the Environmental Commission as a partner in that you provide expertise. So that's one of the things they want to know. Who is your partner? Why are they a partner? What is their interest? How will they help? Especially what kind of expertise will they bring to bear?
Mm-hmm.
You guys, obviously, I know I'm going to present my concept plan to you. You will have comments. You will have recommendations. And there is a lot of expertise in this commission. So you will be very helpful to us. So if you identify yourself as a partner and express how you will help and what your expertise is, that would be very helpful. So you need to vote on that.
Yeah, okay, I propose we draft a letter of support for this project and the living shoreline and the outreach to restore this cove and improve the cove and act as a partner providing expertise.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
One question.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Randy.
Randy.
I was just wondering, were there any grassroots organizations that you have decided to partner with this?
Yes, the Spa Creek Conservancy is one because they originally submitted a living shoreline grant proposal and it was awarded by the trust. However, when the trust and the mayor got together and then they pulled me in, they started talking about community charrettes and learning a little bit more about how the community wants to use this property and building in some water access and connectivity to the communities surrounding it. The Spa Creek Conservancy did not feel comfortable with the community outreach portion, although the city did volunteer to perform it for them. And because we knew we could do it much more efficiently and effectively than hiring a consultant and waiting and paying somebody for what we know we can do anyway. They still didn't feel comfortable with it, and their board felt that it was better for the city to just apply for the entire grant.
No, I meant like from the Eastport, like from the neighboring community, like Eastport Terrace or Harbor House, any grassroots organizations from those communities.
Well, those aren't exactly grassroots organizations, but those are communities. I am reaching out to different housing communities for support letters. HACA is a partner. HACA's involved, so I've asked them for a support letter as well. HACA's doing most of the information dissemination to the residents of Harbor House and Eastport Terrace. I engaged our African-American liaison and Hispanic liaisons to they were passing out a lot of the flyers and talking to people on the street and trying to gin up interest and get feedback from people who may not participate in a meeting. And we had all the flyers and information that's on the website also translated into Spanish. So we made videos in Spanish and in English. We thought people might not read, but they might watch. And we had a survey that was distributed to Eastport Terrace and Harbor House residents. We didn't get a lot of response to it, but we have it up on the website, and we will continue to perform outreach. Were there particular nonprofits or grassroots organizations?
There's several that, and when I say from those communities, I mean like the people who live in those communities, grassroots organizations that serve a lot of those direct residents, or that serve that direct community, you know what I mean? Or some that come from out of those communities, some of the grassroots organizations. I just know that that's a real best management practice in doing a lot of outreach and restoration with these types of projects.
Okay, if you want to send me names of people or organizations that you're thinking of, I would appreciate that. Because we're making huge effort to try to connect with as many people as possible, especially low-income residents and communities.
Cool. And one other thing, we had made mention about the possibility of ensuring some equity in this project, by hiring some minority-owned vendors to do some of the restoration work, or training some of the residents to do some of the green infrastructure development aspects of the project. And then also looking into not necessarily using a different mode of the ecotourism aspects of like the taxi, and trying to maybe see about working with more diverse owners of taxi type of companies and things like that.
Yeah, these are all things that were raised during the meetings. I think you may have participated in one, Randy.
Yeah, I was.
Because these are all familiar concepts that we have in the minutes. And so these are all things that are being considered. Like I said, the water taxi might not be in the first phase, and it definitely won't be funded by the trust. Another idea was to get vouchers. Perhaps the city could pay for some vouchers that we could hand out to some of the residents in the Eastport Terrace and the Harbor House, that they could use the water taxi if that's something we eventually put in. Just go for a boat ride or take it to Annapolis, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And that children could also use it. And we've talked about minority vendors, obviously we have to, if I get the funding, we have to put this out, RFPs out through the procurement office.
Yeah, and then we'll have a more opportunity to comment on that as they start to go out and look for vendors and things like that too.
And there's going to be some opportunities for people to get involved, especially in the planting. Like when we're doing the construction part, that's just not safe. Vendors won't let volunteers participate in that. But during the planning phase, that's a good time to get people engaged and make them feel a sense of ownership and pride in it, especially children.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other part was one thing I'm going to add to my application is signage that describes, so there's an environmental education component to this that says what a living shoreline is, what it does, what the regenerative stream conveyance system is, what it does. And so we're envisioning this area with the improvements that are made there as an environmental education field trip. And this could, especially for children.
Especially with the facility right there, there's a big opportunity to do a lot of legacy building. Like, for example, signage that highlights some of the great impact that Blacks have had in the Chesapeake Bay in that region.
Right.
Just some ideas.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Randy. We will have chance to comment on all those things as the project proceeds. So, yeah.
So if you guys are going to provide a letter, I'll provide you the details and.
Okay, and you need the letter. Well, your application's due March 4th, so you need it soon, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, today's the 24th, so we'll try and get it to you this weekend, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And again,
did you guys vote?
Yeah. Hello.
Did you vote?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was saying this is actually the perfect opportunity to use the format where they would present the endorsement and then they'll ratify it after.
Right. Yeah. And I think, we usually do say, what we're gonna support in it, and then somebody writes the letter afterwards and we wordsmith it. So that's how we usually operate, So yeah, so we're gonna support the application to plan, do outreach to community, living shoreline, and signage with environmental education.
And you need to tell us how you're gonna help and what your expertise is.
Yeah. Provide expertise.
Thanks.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. So we will work on that letter.
And by we, I mean Devin.
Right, okay, great. And will remind me. All right, you're taking notes on our action items too, Anne.
I am.
Good.
And I think that's part of what Randy's highlighting are areas of expertise that we can highlight in our letter about how we would continue to work on the project.
Okay, all right, good, yeah. Thanks. All right, so moving on, we're gonna go to development review. Allison, I don't know if you're ready to share any documents with the Bemby Beach. Oh, I'm sorry. I have Hudson Street, 39 Hudson Street first, Department of Public Works.
Yeah, I think we can go fast because we've talked about Hudson Street quite a lot. I don't know if you all want to see my screen. I have to have two computers working to make this happen. So it might be easier to just talk for a second. Okay. Kate and Bevan and I drafted a preliminary letter because we thought that the Planning Commission and the Board of Appeals would be talking about 39 Hudson before we had a chance to have this meeting. Turns out there was a snowstorm, and so that didn't happen. So we have the opportunity to submit formal comments again. Our letter talks about the questions that we had in the summer and the meeting that we had in September. The public works site, and the letter highlights a couple of opportunities that we see still outstanding around environmental education and maximizing the kind of site work that's going to happen at 39 Hudson Street. And that was also something that Eric highlighted in his letter. And so we requoted Eric's memo from Planning and Zoning in our letter. And Eric also brought up a good point, which is something that Jackie continues to work on around the electrification of the fleet and just ensuring that that site is sort of future-proofed for what comes next for transitions with the fleet, noting that medium and heavy duty vehicles are really not very likely to be electrified on the sooner side, but certainly lots of other vehicles in the Annapolis fleet are much more likely to be identified, whether or not that they're used by Public Works or by other departments in the city. We should be able to charge them and store them at the Public Works site. So that's all we did. And then we've attached our original letter from July that asked 9,000 questions, which still I think is sort of useful for other stakeholders around the process. So with that, that's the background on 39 Hudson.
Yeah, and so we wanted to submit this letter, so we wouldn't need to vote on it, and submit it to the Planning Commission and the Board of Appeals. And Director Johnson asked us for our support for the new Public Works building. So do you all feel like you have enough information about the letter and what's in it to mail that and or to approve that? And then our original letter, we had already voted on that with all our questions. So Anne, the new letter points out the opportunity for environmental education, keeping it open for electrification of the fleet. And what else was in there?
I also highlighted Jackie's recent note that the grant for conceptual planning for restoration of the creek was not funded. So that we are just pointing out that the work done on the 39 Hudson Street site is now sort of the first step in that creek restoration in the area, and highlighting the opportunity that our commission has and other folks to, sort of continue to support stream restoration in that area.
Yeah, because in our original letter, we had said we want them to coordinate with the other stream restorations that are going on all up and down the street.
Turns out that that's on hold, huh?
Right.
I'm curious, when was that? There was a Weems Creek restoration grant. Is that what you were referring to?
So, Eric, the Severn Riverkeeper program.
Oh, you went on mute, Jackie.
The Severn Riverkeeper program applied for a feasibility study grant to look at that whole stretch of the Moreland branch of Weems Creek. And the county and the city were out there with the Severn Riverkeeper, and we thought it was a great project because it's, a partnership with the city, the county, and a nonprofit, and to look at all, because there are a lot of opportunities back there. There's all kinds of holding ponds and eroded out, areas and steep hillsides and invasives. So it could be a really big project and could be funded by a grant as well as some contribution from the county and the city. And that's the way, we were proposing it. So I know there were a lot of competing, really good competing projects. And so they were looking more for boots in the ground kind of things.
Gotcha.
Shovels in the ground, sorry, boots on the ground, shovels in the ground kinds of projects.
All right, so are you all clear on what's in the letter?
Yes.
Pretty comfortable? Okay, and so I'll just call for a motion to vote on it. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, second?
I second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Any opposed? All right, so Anne, you're gonna be in charge of moving that along to the,
I will, except it has your signature on
Okay,
it, so I'll finalize it for
Right, we'll
you, but you
coordinate.
can hit send. Okay,
sure.
thank you, ma'am.
Next item on the agenda is the briefing on the Bemby Beach development. That was the one that Racine told us about, and it's been in the works for a while. And Allison did a really great job reviewing it. Allison, I can share your latest letter if you want to, or you can do it if you want.
I have it up, so I can share it.
Okay.
And thanks, Allison. I goofed up and not sending it with the agenda yesterday. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I reached out to a couple of colleagues from some external local environmental organizations who graciously volunteered some time. And so this letter that I put together is basically a culmination of my questions and comments along with a couple of others. And they have a few different general categories, which fall into some of the ones that we just talked about as priorities. The first, trees and tree canopy. As you can imagine, this is a 5-acre site off of Bemby Beach Road, directly across from the Ellen Moyer Nature Park. And the proposed development is a 42 townhome development, which does at this point include about 1.5 acres, which is proposed to be dedicated to the city of waterfront property and a non-tidal wetland. So that's the overview. The trees and tree canopy questions and comments are basically around preserving as much tree canopy as we can on the site. Right now, obviously, putting in 42 townhomes on 5 acres, about 3.5 of those acres are to be cleared. And there's a lot of trees that are going to be coming down, large trees. There's some comments in here about how the majority of the trees that are coming down in the tree save plan look to be in good condition, and the ones that are remaining on site are in poor condition. There's also some questions and comments for the city in here to consider. We know from reviewing these that they haven't identified areas for all of the mitigation to go in. So some questions about how that will be mitigated through the fee and lieu program or otherwise, if they haven't identified appropriate areas for that mitigation to occur. Other things that we noted here with other plantings not related to tree mitigation is that they are proposing at least 2 that I found, but possibly more invasive species. So comments were made to remove those from the plans if at all possible, and to maximize the use of native plantings. Also comment about the density of the perennial plantings and ensuring that those are going to be dense enough to outcompete any invasives that may try and colonize that disturbed area. And then there's 2 sections here that relate very much to that non-tidal wetland that I mentioned. So the nearshore area, the waterfront property, and non-tidal wetland is under proposal to be dedicated to the city. However, there are some concerns that were raised about relative sea level rise over the next 20 years and what that is going to do to that nearshore area and non-tidal wetland. Specifically, you know, if this area is dedicated to the city in terms of what the city's obligations are going to be to protect that area, because they are dedicating it for public access, which is a great thing that goes along with you know, our priorities. But that wetland could be lost over time if there's no mitigation or wetland migration corridor associated with that. So developing the upland immediately adjacent to that wetland could result in the loss of that wetland over time because it has no area to mitigate upland once sea levels rise. So there's some general comments about that as well. And stormwater management relating to the amount of impervious surface at the site. Right now, they are proposing just over 3 parking spaces per unit. The requirement is 2 parking spaces per unit. So there was a comment about whether or not that could be whittled down anymore, and if any of that parking area could be converted to pervious. There's already some pervious parking areas included in the plan, but the question was, is there an opportunity to expand that even more?
So
there are a couple
Allison, in the plan, is just the parking for the cars, is that pervious, or is it?
There are portions of it. So there are 2 alleyways which are pervious, and I believe the remainder of the parking is impervious, but there are 2 shared alleyways that are pervious out of the whole site.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think there's room for them to make more pervious parking just where cars are parking?
I think so. That's the comment that was in there, basically. Okay. Like, can you review and ensure that there's no more room for turning this impervious into pervious?
Right, and because they also needed a minimum of 2 spots per unit, but they are putting in 3. So I mean, they can decrease some parking area and just do the bare minimum, which is fine, yeah.
Yeah, it was originally 3.5 parking spaces and they took out 2 units. So now it's 3, just over 3 parking spaces. They are including 3 parking spaces at the very end for public access for people to drive in and park at the site to access the shoreline there. But overall, that's not contributing hugely to the overall average per unit. And then just a couple more things here. Plan development. So there was some questions about if this 30% of the ground area may be devoted to planned development uses, if that is compliant with the city's current ordinance. And wildlife conflicts. So as you all know, as I mentioned, this is right across from Ellen Moyer Park. There's a lot of wildlife in that area, and a lot of wildlife that are moving in between sort of different little patches of habitat in that general vicinity. So what would the impacts of further fragmenting that very limited woodland habitat be? And lastly, this is sort of tangential, but we've talked about it in equity and access. There are some concerns about the provisions around access. That would be a simple vote of the HOA to permanently restrict access at that site. So we wanted to ask if there are any assurances for long-term access that could be included in whatever covenant is going to guide the access at that site.
Right. I mean, I would rather see the city get an easement on the site for public access, it shouldn't be subject to a HOA vote, because you know what the way that vote's going. They're going to vote us all off the island, right?
Yeah, so those are the general comments. It's kind of long, so I apologize for that, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you guys might have.
And also, let me just chime in, and thank you so much, Alice. This was a ton of work, and it was super thorough review too. Let me just jump in and say where it is procedurally. So it's still in the Department of Planning. So our comments and questions would go to the Department of Planning. They have not forwarded it yet to the planning commission. So we would have another crack at it to say, okay, we'd get some of these questions answered by the city and then go, okay, and then what's our position on it at the planning commission? So any questions on that or questions on the content?
Evan, can I ask a procedural thing? I feel like in the past, before my time, you all had presentations on certain developments at the AEC. Could we invite them to come answer some of Allison's questions?
Sure. And this would go to the planning department and they would share it with the developer who would see the questions as well. So, do you want the planning department or the developer to come, or both?
Could we do both?
Sure.
Invite them both to our next
You can invite
meeting?
them both, sure. Do other members want to hear a briefing to get some of these questions answered?
Yeah, I think that'd be worth a time, sometime on one of our agendas.
Okay.
What's the price tag they're putting on these 42 units? These townhomes? Or were they townhomes, or was I misunderstanding?
I don't know.
They're townhomes, and I didn't see that in any of the.
Yeah,
That's part of
I
the-
think they're condos. But this is a project that's been in the works for 11 years now. So you're getting in at the very beginning as far as making comments and whatnot. And I think you should follow up on that. But I think they're going to be apartments / condos that are going in there.
That's right. Yeah, they're all condos. I think it's the longest running project within the planning and zoning.
Wow.
I think it goes back to like 2006 or something. There've been various iterations of it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and going through some of the materials, it's been through many iterations, and a lot of changes have been made because of prior environmental concerns and other generalized concerns that planning and zoning has brought to them. So this is the latest iteration in a long line.
Okay. Thanks. There were a ton of documents that I sent for you to review, so thanks.
And this is the one where I'm looking at the image and there's like a house like right next door, and is that the one where like the homeowners, they've had to work around that homeowner?
That's the homeowner, from what I understand, from who I was speaking to, that's the homeowner who does not like the developer. So this homeowner apparently is holding out selling his property. So I guess he's somebody that's approachable and you can talk to, but as far as his project, he's not supporting it because he doesn't like the developer. That's my understanding.
And the current plan, as I reviewed it, does not include, they basically planned around his property.
Okay. All right, so I would propose we have a motion to vote on sending this letter with all of our questions and comments on it to the planning department.
Yeah, along with an invitation to workshop the questions at the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah, I just didn't put that in because we don't need to vote on inviting them, but so vote on planning this or sending this to the planning department is seconded. So all in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you so much, Allison. We will get that sent. And we will also invite them to give us a briefing on all those cute questions and answers. And I'll also get the timing for the when they're sending it to the planning commission. So we're ready for that. All right, let's see. The next thing on our agenda was Alderwoman Tierney's resolution, but I think it's been pulled. So
Yeah.
The old Department of Public Works site, right?
Yeah, could I just have 2 minutes?
Sure,
maybe?
sure, please.
Yeah. Oh no, well, because Eric's here, and I just want to give a little background. Eric presented at twice, more recently to the Ward 1 Residents Association, and addressed opportune areas for development. And one of them was the Spa Road site as an opportune area for development. And so after the meeting, that got a lot of, I got a lot of email on that. And from, I don't know if you know Bob Warden, he's a historian that knows so much about the parole camps, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course, environmentalists that are very concerned about the remediation. So in my dream world, I thought, wow, how cool would it be if we just left that as open space dedicated to parole? I mean, make it sort of like a sacred space, because we talk about the parole camps and there's nothing visible. I mean, there's the sign on Route 2, and we're collecting artifacts, but I mean, I'm kind of thinking of like a mini Gettysburg, and
And
just
that's from the Revolutionary War or the Civil War? I can't remember.
That was the Civil War,
Okay.
where we retrained prisoners to help fight our cause. And so Rob Warden helped me with a resolution. But then the reality struck, and my understanding from David Jarrell, the city manager, is it's sort of the domino effect. The sale of that property is going to help offset the Hudson Street purchase. And there's also extensive remediation that has to be done. And it's the hope that a developer would pick up those costs sort of as their impact, in lieu of impact fees, they'd have to do all of this remediation. And David didn't seem to think that the Weems-Wayland remediation would be that extensive. That would be just sort of a topping off. So it does bring up though, this remediation issue and how we're going to handle it. And the reality too is, Ward 1's getting a lot of infill development lately. If you've looked on West Street and all, and and I understand that we need property tax. I understand all that, but we also need affordable housing. So I'm just editorializing now, but if you ask the developer to pick up all of that remediation, he certainly is not going to be able to build us affordable housing. You know, it's going to be more $1 million condo. So, but the good news is Eric listened and he gets it, and he's gonna just sort of elaborate or try to elaborate a little bit more on this site in the comprehensive plan, right, Eric? I'll let him say a few words about it, but I think that's at least a victory, that we just don't write it off for development. You know, the term opportunity sites always bites us in the back. But I do want to respect, you know, the history there. I'm worried about the remediation costs, and I'm doubtful that we'll be able to get, you know, affordable housing there. So it's just so that's sort of my status of everything. But thank you for entertaining the idea of the resolution, which didn't get finalized.
Very welcome. And that's a nice segue to Eric too, because our next discussion is with Eric on the comp plan. So
that's more important.
Eric, do you want to start there, and then we can just go into a discussion on the equity, inclusion, and green space in the comp plan?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I don't have a presentation or anything.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say regarding the Spa Road site is that we are planning to treat it as a case study in the comp plan, meaning we've selected 5 sites, 5, I guess you could call them sites that will likely redevelop in some way over the next 10, 20 years. You know, just these are sites that they're not, their current use is not the best use of them. They could be serving the city better. You know, this is the only one that's owned by the city, and the rest are all privately owned, and frankly, we don't know when they would change. But the idea is, we're not saying that this is where development should, these are not the first places that might change over in some way, but they're places where there should be a sort of paradigm shift in how we think about what happens there. You know, where there could be a significant change in what happens there, and should be, you know, they should reflect the values that we identify in the comprehensive plan, which are kind of in the works, but we have a whole set of principles I think I may have shared the last time I was with you. So, I mean, at the Spa Road site, you know, it is challenging. I think obviously the context of it is and that's with all these case studies that we're talking about. The context is really the driver. You know, they all have different surrounding communities. They all have transportation context, you know, that could be improved or diversified in terms of how easy it is to get to these places without a car. Or and so at the Spa Road site, I mean, obviously the Spa Creek context is a huge driver of what happens on that site. Sounds like, I don't know as much about the historical component, but that sounds like a pretty significant piece. Its relationship to Maryland Hall. You know, I mean, we want to pull in all of those things and sort of say, hey, there's our cues to what should happen here. You know, I mean, probably need like a different word than development, like moving forward. I think about this all the time, because you know, we often get into this binary discussion where it's like it is either preservation or development, you know, and we kind of like eliminate all these things in between, which, you know, obviously anything that happens there is going to remediate the site, is going to have has to have a very strong ecological position. But I tend to think that there's some way of balancing some other use besides total preservation, but that's just my opinion. I don't, you know, I feel like thinking about a broad set of needs is important, but, you know, what we want to do with these case studies is come up with an engagement process. And so right now the plan is to set up kind of almost like a specific web page on the comprehensive plan website that would be dedicated to each of these sites and lay out some of the background context info that we have and provide a way for people to sort of chime in. And we'll probably have at least one online workshop related to kind of gather input. And what we come up with is not going to be a definitive solution to the site. It should just provide some guidance to what happens next. These are the things that anybody who is taking this on should be thinking about, should be considering. And so this one is particularly challenging, though. And I agree with Alderman Tierney in terms of even if affordable housing is sort of a goal for the city, this site is a tough one to sort of include. That's almost like without a certain amount of density, you can't have it. And then would that go against some of the other principles we've set for the site? So, I don't know. I don't have all the answers yet, but I guess that's sort of pivoting to the equity discussion. As it relates, that's something that is threaded throughout the comprehensive planning process. But as it relates to environmental concerns, there's sort of a few places where it comes up in the comprehensive plan. It certainly comes up in our land use chapter. It comes up in the community facilities chapter, which talks about parks and trails and other kind of public resources, and then sensitive areas, and then water resources. Those are really the major places where, from an environmental perspective, we're going to be talking about equity. So I just wanted to highlight a few things that I touched on last time. The social vulnerability index is kind of like, that's sort of our starting point. That's something that we haven't included in the past. It's kind of gives us some clarity on where the most vulnerable populations are. I shared that map in my last presentation. It kind of confirms a lot of what we already know, but it's a good baseline, everybody's on the same page. We're using that as a base layer, if you will, for a lot of our mapping. So if anybody's been plugged into, Sally's been kind of, Director Nash has been leading this update of our adequate public facilities ordinance, which is about, bringing our parks requirement for developers kind of up to the 21st century. And we're using a map essentially that shows park open space equity for that. And that's, we use a radius for different types of parks that show where the gaps are. Access to equitable access to the waterfront is a big part of that as well. The connectivity, this is kind of huge. It's in the community facilities chapter. It's going to be in land use, but basically trying to find ways that will help us to limit and restore the connections that used to be in the city, or limit future efforts to sort of kind of separate neighborhoods, roads that don't go through, trails, that don't connect. I think that's kind of a foundational thing to inclusion. The sensitive areas chapter, again, it'll use that social vulnerability index base map. And I think if you look at the Maryland state guidelines for comprehensive plans as they talk about sensitive areas, most of it is about floodplain conditions, basically places where development could have a really adverse impact. If it's not already discouraged, that you really shouldn't develop in these places, that kind of thing. We're taking a more expansive view on what we mean by sensitive areas, and we're thinking about these upland areas that have significant heat impacts. And that's something that, we should be talking about as a climate change impact. And, that tree canopy is a big metric in that regard, impervious coverage. And so we're doing some mapping that will really, it's not there yet. We're waiting on this new data that Sean Wampler and Brian Adams are kind of have been coordinating. That's a new tree canopy data for the city. So that'll be kind of the main info we use for that. But I mean, I think I want to talk to you, Jackie, more about this, but I mean, there's cities around the country that are there's a program that is run through NOAA, I believe, that basically does like real surface temperature mapping. And so it's kind of like we can use our impervious coverage and our tree canopy data to get to, where the heat islands are, but it's not telling us exactly how hot these places are or what that, real risk is there. It just kind of tells us relatively, where there might be some health impacts. And so that's something, down there, that'll be a recommendation that we get just like better data on that front. I think that also in sensitive areas, it's got outside of maybe environmental concerns, but just diverse narratives, making sure that we're preserving city's heritage in ways that go beyond the historic district, and thinking about I just been thinking a lot about like Ward 3, and we have places there that are not really protected historically, but there's narratives there that go back to the Civil War, and typically historic preservation is it actually can make people's lives very difficult in terms of managing their property, but there's ways of culturally protecting the character of places. And so that's just an aside, but that's in the sensitive areas. And then water resources, last chapter where I think equity stuff comes in is for environmental concerns. I mean, I think one of the big ones is understanding where the outfalls are. I mean, there's a lot of work being done related to our MS4 permit, and how we already have a lot of projects, I think, in the pipeline. But I think maybe looking at where the outfalls are in relation to different communities, and whether there's a way of prioritizing based on where those outfalls are, again, related to the social vulnerability mapping. That's just one area. I mean, and then I think I'm particularly challenged on the water resources one for how to kind of overlay the equity lens, but that's just kind of like one area right now that we're thinking about. So that's kind of an update. Sorry, the one last thing I'll say is, I mentioned it when I was last with you, but we have this equitable resilience framework idea, and that's something that we have an intern working on us with. And the whole idea there is just basically helping to define resilience for the whole city in a way that can kind of impact every community of the city, and just make sure that it's not just people at the water's edge, that has some value to. So that's something I hope to be able to share with you, in a few weeks. I think that's going to move kind of quickly. So.
So Eric, I have some questions. I'll just start out with the first question, because we have, it's 8:22 and we want to adjourn by 9, but so we do have some time for discussion. One thing that I'm thinking about with equity in the city is, we're spending, I don't know, 60 million or something like that on city dock, protecting it from floods. A lot of that is not for flood protection. I could probably cut that in half and say that amounts for flood protection, but that's a public area. But then it was mentioned like, oh, well, Eastport's going to need a lot of, it's going to be underwater too, but that's mostly private homes that are waterfront homes. We need to think about equity of like, is the public going to pay to preserve these waterfront private $1 million private homes that, none of us have that access, and are they going to ask us to pay with, what I think that needs to be some kind of equity consideration there. So who's paying for protecting private property? And should it be private property if we're paying to protect it? So, that's something that we need to start considering because climate change is here,
Absolutely.
Just
And Paul?
one example, Bevan, is Miami Beach. Comparable homes 2 blocks inland now sell for approximately 7% more than waterfront. So that's the answer, where you let the market solve that, right? And not your tax dollars, right? So that's my thought is hands off. If the insurance bill gets too high for waterfront, let people move 1 block into inland or jack their house up a little bit. But I should, now maybe we have to fortify some pieces of land that are prone to erosion, but that's a little bit different than climate change. So anyways, I'm one to be more hands off on that and let the market eat the loss.
Right. But if there's going to be a move to protect land from going underwater, it's got to be integrated and it's got to be a big public works project, right? You can't I'm going to do my house right here. The neighbor can't do theirs, so it's going to flood everybody. So, who's going to take on that project? Who's going to pay for it? Is the city? Is that community? Those homeowners going to pay for it? Is the city going to facilitate it? That's just something we need to start talking about as a community.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think we start, generally speaking, there's a lot of public assets already at risk in these places, in Eastport, for example. And so, that's kind of a place to start. But yeah, the private property is certainly, I don't have that yet.
One of the things, then, I don't know, Eric, if this is a part of the social vulnerability assessment, but I see in terms of water resources a connection between food deserts and easy and equal access to those types of resources, and the fact that there are very few, if any, places to crab and fish in the city of Annapolis. So, the ability to utilize the natural resources for sustenance in areas where we are also plagued by food deserts and other challenges, I think is one connection there.
That's a great point. This is also kind of outside of your commission's purview, maybe, I don't know, but this sounds a little like a boutique interest in a way, but I have been thinking about ways of expanding how the farmers market works in the region, and I don't know if that comes up much around here, but
Can I jump in for a second?
Amazing one.
We're working with Luminous Health, which is the Anne Arundel Medical Center in HACA, and I've engaged a whole bunch of different people in developing. This came to us from Anne Arundel Medical Center's sustainability officer, establishing a farmers market in the Eastport Shopping Center and a food pantry in Eastport Terrace, Harbor House, and a community garden in that community. And this all is interconnected. The farmers market obviously be open to everybody and anyone. And we're hoping the Eastport Civic Association will help get out the word. So I've been connecting HACA and AANC with people in the mayor's office and people in the community and Alderman Gay and Alderman Arnett. Also Bumper Moyer had met with me and Brian Callahan about establishing a community garden for the benefit of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House as well. So I've connected him and his enthusiasm with AAMC as well. So that's just one.
That's great to hear.
I can take questions later from you guys about that if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, under the water resources, I also wanted to mention that our source water protection is very important. And, I think one of our wells is out near the airport. And if you've been, you follow water and water contamination news, PFAS is very much used at high use at airports because it's firefighting foam for airports and they practice out there and things like that too. So that is one of those things where, and that's an environmental justice issue too, because, if communities don't trust the water that they're drinking, they go and buy bottled water. And then people that, spend, have lower income spend a far greater amount of their income on bottled water. So, and I know a lot of people, I've served water in pitchers at Christmas time and people go to me, is that Annapolis water? I'm not drinking it. And I go, I read the water reports. It's very safe, but we want to keep it safe. We drink aquifer water and it's millions of years old and it's very good water. So, keeping water affordable for people and making sure people know about it, that it is safe and clean to drink is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not using their hard-earned income on it.
That's a great point. I know, Jackie, I know you're working on something related to composting, and that's something that I think we would include in the community facilities chapter just to kind of keep moving that initiative along. But sort of that's, yeah, I don't know if that's I don't know what the equity element of that is, but other thoughts that you all have that things on your mind that you want to make sure? I mean, I know this portion of the discussion is, we were trying to talk about equity, the equity lens here, but I mean, I think anything else that is on your mind?
One thing that I came across when reviewing the Bembe Beach proposal was the green space / recreation requirements per person or per unit of dwelling. It was like 500 square feet of green space required for each unit that's constructed. And I can talk to you offline, Eric, but I was just sort of curious about how that is cited. Is there a distance requirement for that? Like it has to be within this amount of distance from where the units are being built, or is there an opportunity to ensure that if development is going in and there is a requirement for green space or recreation, that it's being put in a place that can actually be accessed by those people who are going to move into that development?
Yeah, that's actually what we're doing right now with the adequate public facilities update related to park space. So that's going through a really significant revision. And it's a lot to summarize, but essentially the new requirements sort of in draft form right now. I mean, this is something that we're going to be sharing with City Council very soon. We're just sort of circulating the draft legislation within planning and zoning right now, but essentially there is going to be a requirement to provide what we're calling a mini park. It's essentially under half an acre. That would be required, and really the only way out of that would be well, I think we have to kind of find the right language, but we're really trying to prevent any kind of workaround on that one. That's something that really should be provided on site. And the space provides, and then if they, and then there are fee in lieu options, but the price of that is going to be really kind of market based. So right now, the fees are not, I would say, not where they should be. They're way too low, and so what the guideline is going to actually, provide an example of what a current park development costs that the city did, and land cost plus park improvement, and that would basically give the developer an indication of what the investment should be. But we're actually trying to regulate things along. So I'm trying to think how to summarize this. The first thing, so if I should have said this initially, but they only have to provide that on-site mini park if they're not within a quarter mile of another mini park. So that's the first step. Are they within a quarter mile of a mini park? We did some calculations to determine what the maximum population that each mini park should serve would be, and we kind of did it this way. We said the city is approximately 8 square acres. We have about 40,000 people, and this would be updated. I forget what the legislation says, but it would be updated, I think, every 5 years. We determined if we're treating the walk rate, the service area of a mini park to be a quarter mile walk, then that means we're aiming to have 40 mini parks within the city. I think right now we have about 30 based on our definition. And so based on that, 40 mini parks, each mini park should serve about 1,000 people. So there would actually be a population analysis, and we would say, is the mini park that's within a quarter mile already serving 1,000 people? If it is, then there's the requirement to put a new mini park on site. If it's not, if they actually can accommodate more people, then that development is qualifies. The other option is that they can pay into a fund, and again, this is market based, but they could basically pay into a fund that would contribute money to the next two park types that we identify in the legislation are neighborhood playground, which is, I think we said, ½ acre to 1 acre. And then that's kind of like a community park. But then there's, or a neighborhood size park. And then the largest park is a Truxton Park, Ellen Moyer Park type facility. That's, several acres in size at least. And then basically we identify priority projects in all of those parks and other city projects that we want investment in. And we basically say, based on that equity map, these are the places where your investment should go. They should also serve the population that's going into this new development. But we're really trying to find a way to sort of stretch the developer's investment into other parts of the city, but there has to be a sort of nexus to their project. So that's kind of the, again, this legislation for review is going to be coming out pretty soon. You guys are going to be seeing that. So it's definitely a pretty significant update. So,
quick follow-up, Bevan.
Good.
Is that okay?
Mhm.
So could the fund also be used to purchase undeveloped parcels in addition to, maintenance and upgrades to existing parks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really, I think that would be the first thing we'd be wanting. That's really like the first opportunity or priority would be to look at creating a new park, purchasing land and creating a new opportunity there. But short of that, I mean, we're obviously pretty
It's
tight.
gonna have, yeah, that's gonna have to be a huge fee in lieu to ever get
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
money, you know,
But
to,
we're
for,
also,
I mean, it could go towards the pot, you know.
yeah. Well, then there's the other scenario that's in this legislation is really encouraging partnership agreements with other, there's a lot of privately owned public space in the city. It's not quite public, but it could be. And we want a developer to sort of think creatively about, how can we make some of this, is there an arrangement that could be worked out with an adjacent property to make their, HOA space publicly accessible, but that it's really to pass muster. I mean, it has to be open dawn till dusk, and essentially it has to follow the same access guidelines as city park. So, but that's
Okay. Any other questions? I think, Paul, you have your hand up.
Oh, I
Mistaken?
do have one question. On the fee in lieu, and as we say, market rate, and as Eric says, it's a bit low. I don't want anyone to do a whole lot of extra work, but it would seem to be pretty easy just to look at how many developers paid the fee in lieu instead of any other methods or and from watching the county go through it a little bit, the fee, the developers are going to gripe about you raise it a penny, right? But it was like 80 or 90% of the projects, they just stroke the check for fee in lieu. It's like a parking ticket. It's just a cost of doing business. So and you can see a lot of my stuff comes back to money or being equitable, right? It's like you've said before. So Eric, do you have a rough idea of what percentage of developments, what you're speaking of, they just pay the fee in lieu instead of doing anything else?
No, I don't have that number, but I think it's my guess is there would be as you say, disproportionately slanted towards the paying the fee. I mean, I think especially in this town, I mean, I think it's faced with, giving up, leasable or sellable land on site versus a very low fee in lieu.
Right. If they can fit another unit in there and sell it for almost $1 million, we know where that's going, right?
Yeah, so my point, I think we all see that we need to bump it up. Eric, if it was not, or Ellie, if it was not too difficult, if we had an approximation on that, that would give a lot more strength to our position that fee and lieu rates need to be increased.
No,
Yeah, I
they
think
definitely are. Yeah.
Yeah, we have that data. It was a failure for the moderately priced dwelling units. It was just a failed structure. The fee in lieu of was low and it didn't give us anything. So we actually revised the legislation. We revised the code to not accept fee in lieu of for moderately priced dwelling units. Just build them instead.
Nice.
So.
Okay. Well, thanks, Eric. Does anybody have any other ideas for what should go in the comp plan for, an equity inclusion and ideas?
My question is sort of to Randy. We sort of combined two items on the agenda so that we could also sort of talk about our commission recommendations around equity and inclusion. And so I don't know, do we have anything that we should do specifically for like a letter or comments around the plan, or is it more that, and I guess, Eric, are there, specific conversations that we can be useful for in this stage of the planning, or more when you have a draft and then we can comment?
I think the best thing would be to share just like a memo or something that really identifies the things that you see as important components of kind of equity policy or diversity, equity, inclusion. That would be, you know, things that kind of are most on your mind as priorities. That would probably be the most helpful.
Yeah. So we did draft up a memo, but it wasn't focused on the comp plan. It was just a general memo. So a lot of things in there won't pertain to the comp plan, but we could pull things out and you know, add some things and just create a memo just for the comp plan. But yeah, we did want to get our other letter out as well. I mean, I don't know if we did pull it up, I think last time. I don't know if we have time to pull it up now. What time is it? 8:43. Oh, we do have time to pull it up. But we do want to finish the discussion with Eric first. But yeah, so you suggest a memo on important elements around equity and inclusion that should be in the comp plan.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I mean,
Okay.
I think I should have addressed it already, but you know, I mean, the stuff that you brought up last time, Randy, about the essentially, like, I think of them as like programs that would provide more opportunities for people to engage in stewardship and environmental work in the city. And that's definitely still on our minds. I'm trying to find the right place for that in the comp plan. It's sort of like one of these things that doesn't, I mean, there's certainly, there are ways to insert economic development initiatives are in the comp plan. And so it's sort of partly there, but also kind of like those kind of programs could be run out of parks, you know, the parks department. And so it could be in the community facilities chapter. But it's just something that I find falls between the structure that we're given by the state. And so it's a little bit challenging, but it's
right. So maybe, Eric, so I was thinking maybe we shouldn't weed through that and pick through what belongs in the comp plan. Maybe we should just give you everything we did and you can figure out what.
I think that would be really helpful. That would be fine. I mean, that's like when I met with Ward 1, you know, I didn't really ask them to fit exactly within the structure of the comprehensive plan. I was just more interested in what their priorities were, you know, and then it helped. We can, in planning and zoning, and we can find the right place for it within the framework we have for the comprehensive plan. I think it's just more, we want to make sure we're hitting all the things that are important to folks. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And also, I mean, that's not the only avenue we're going to pursue. We're going to, you know, give it to the watershed cabinet, or I forget what the cabinet's called.
Waterways cabinet.
Waterways cabinet, right. Yeah. So, I mean, some of those things will be pursued on and through other avenues, but what we can get in the comp plan, that would be great to get in the comp plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I get what you mean totally, and I think that's a good idea. And so, do we have like a soft deadline for that?
Maybe by your next meeting. Is that?
Yeah.
Would that be reasonable?
That's fine.
Yeah. Did we have the memo ready with the points, or did we want to put that up on screen and look at that tonight, or do you want to send it around for the next for people to look at?
Yeah, I like to
add too. Okay.
Yeah, send it out. And
okay.
Everybody can solicit their input on it.
Right. You know. Okay. All right. We'll put that as a to-do item. I have a question, not about equity, but just kind of about development in general. So is there some way that we can put in the comp plan something like some concept of, you know, we would like development not to come in and scrape every bit of you know, topsoil, shrub, grass, tree, everything when they are doing a development here? Like, one that I've seen recently that I was shocked at seeing, and it was bigger than a football field. And, you know, they preserved a little area over in the side because we paid them with program open space funds, because the commission pushed the last administration to really fight to save something on that development project. But I went out and looked at the rest of it and I was shocked. I mean, just shocked.
I mean, I probably owe it to myself to and to you all to scrutinize how I admit I'm not completely up yet on how our forest conservation ordinance works in terms of how it spells out what, you know, I mean, if there's a desire to sort of create, I assume the goal is to create maintain contiguous forest land. And so with that site, you know, they probably met the guideline, the requirement, and just happened to be with that site, you know, a large portion of forest area that still is preserved. But yeah, I don't know yet. We have it, you know, I mean, my understanding is that our ordinance is pretty strict, but I have to scrutinize that more.
Right. And are there incentives we can offer for environmentally sensitive development? I mean, I have a house and a property where it's, you know, it's full of full of trees, and they developed the whole, you know, subdevelopment, whatever, but everybody just went in and took out the amount of trees that you needed to just put a little house down in a driveway. All the other trees are left, you know, and that's the way the whole place was developed. So you can develop a place like that, you know. You don't have to take down everything and topsoil too, which is important carbon sequestration, topsoil, you know. Right. Soil health is a big ag practice for carbon, you know, climate change.
Well, I think what I need to do is look at our current ordinance and see and talk to, you know,
right. See if there's,
and see if there's, I mean, I think the idea of, and we actually have talked about this, incentives for going above and beyond and figuring out what that metric is, you know, is it, it seems to me it's more than just, you know, preserving more than the required, or, you know, we already have like a no net loss, but like it's, where is that, you know, the functional value, understanding the functional value of what's there already and that. So it's, but,
and I know there's soil compaction standards that you know, Soil Conservation District adopts and things like that. So that's another thing, soil compaction standards.
Yeah. I'll see if I can, what's possible there.
Okay, yeah. I'm happy to talk to you more offline too. We don't need to. I just had another question, Alderman Tierney, don't want to put you on the spot, but I know this is up before the city council, was water access at Tucker Street. While we're talking about water access, and they're talking about all these requirements for getting like a permit to go down that ramp there because it's for city people, not for county people. So how does that align with, you know, easy water access to our residents?
I know I usually sponsor Title 15 legislation. I'm beginning to doubt on this one, but no, seriously, the confusion is on this is that it's always been for residents only. This isn't to restrict it. So that's in the code. But apparently this is something that the residents have asked for, Alderman Payon, to have some system where they have a permit, and because it's getting a lot of misuse, and there's this bottleneck of cars and stuff. So they just wanted it to be managed better. And then the legislation also transfers that management to the harbor master, where it probably should be because it's water based. But what are your concerns that?
Well, my
it
concerns
restricts-
are when you put hurdles in front of people and require a permit, then you are keeping people out, and people of limited income and limited means and limited time to surf around and find, find the requirements to get over the hurdle to get, I mean, it's creating impediments to access. And so I see Hispanic people there out in their canoe fishing, and like, are they even gonna know they need a permit, and are they gonna have time to get it? Are they gonna have money, or is it gonna cost money? Why can't we just show our driver's license?
Yes.
I mean, why are we making it so hard?
Yeah, this is something the public, I mean, I'm really relying on the public input because this is coming from the residents. And so it's, we as alderpersons have to respect our residents' requests, but your point is very important. And and that has to come across when we vote as a council, it's a balance, it sort of brings up another issue that's worth discussing, but that's, I mean, as I said, it's to really, I guess you
I mean,
could say
you need a permit to launch a raft down there. I think that is over and above. I mean, I think that's just keeping kids out. I think it's keeping people who are, don't know all the rules out. There's already parking restrictions, so you can't go and dump your car there, So you have to launch your boat and take it and park it somewhere else, right? I think that and showing your ID is probably enough. I think it's overkill. And I think, these kinds of things are to keep certain people out. That's what I think.
If I lived on Tucker Street or right around there, I would want tight restriction. That's natural. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but I would like it to be my private little park. And so the residents that have probably spoken so far are the people right near there, and it's another version of NIMBYism. So I agree completely with Bevan. At least for the first year, can we just use driver's license? And if it still proves to be a problem, you can tighten the screws later. The other thing that would be nice is if there, I don't know, probably just a little sign there, a tasteful one, directing non-Annapolitans to the next nearest public park, which I think, is it called Jonas Green when you go over the Severn River Bridge on the Arnold side, right by that restaurant? There's nice water access there. It's big. There's dedicated parking for 80 cars or a lot. So, somebody inadvertently comes from wherever and they're like, I'm sorry, not here, but let's not be jerks, just a mile and a half away on the other side of the bridge, you can go play as much as you want.
Yeah.
So driver's license until it proves to be not sufficient.
Yeah, I've asked to make it just for a boat, to Bevan's point, even kayaks should be allowed, and it shouldn't be, you don't need a permit for kayaks and rafts and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be fixed. And then I also wanted to go to the port warden and see what they have to say about it.
And I will also say that my boat is docked right across the creek from that docking area. And I never see it too crowded. I'm there on the weekends, most every weekend. I never see it crowded. I never see a huge line of cars there, maybe 2, 3 at the most. So I don't know what the problem is they're trying to fix with this. And I think it's overkill.
Okay. Point taken.
Thanks. All right, any other comments? I know we have like 4 minutes left. We don't need to fill it.
Just like a point of procedure, we had so many action items for our last meeting. I made a table of them because I was trying to sort of sort things out. We didn't make great use of it, in part because we have so many action items that, it was sort of overwhelming to see everything. And then we had a bunch of email exchanges around stuff, so much so that I got mixed up and missed Allison's amazing work for today's meeting. So does anyone have any thoughts about how we can sort of do it better next time? Can we cut some action items over email maybe, just so we have like a sort of
Oh.
smaller universe of things to
Hmm.
follow up on.
Well, I mean, I guess, some of those action items didn't get done, but I think they're still on our list to do, like sharing the diversity, equity, inclusion ideas. I found it helpful going back to that list and figuring out what I needed to do for this meeting, reminders. So could we just keep it as a running list? Would that be helpful for folks?
It would be for me.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a good idea.
Okay,
Okay.
well, I'll update it from today's meeting
Okay.
and maybe we can do a couple more interim check-ins over email,
Right, okay,
going back to the list, just
Yeah.
so we don't get overwhelmed on the sort of final week before our next
right,
meeting.
okay, right.
I'm the only one who got overwhelmed. That's fine.
Well, and then maybe
I'm not saying we gotta-
before our next meeting, I think people listed for each task can maybe take it upon themselves to update the table,
Mhm.
just so not everything's on Anne. I don't want her
Right,
to have to
okay.
manage that table
Yeah.
month to month. That'd be a lot of
Right.
work.
Thanks. Well, I'll update it with today's meeting.
Okay, thanks. And we were gonna send around just a list of just like, are we sending around an email list of just action items? I know we have a few things, that letters we need to get out, especially the one for Jackie on the
Right.
Hawkins
How
Cove
about I
project.
add them to the list, but sort of with some sort of time sensitive thing
Okay,
for the ones that we really have to do in the next week.
okay, okay,
Oh, you don't
Alright.
have to write a letter on Tucker Street. I'll just use this
Okay.
meeting. Yeah,
okay, thanks.
I got it.
Appreciate it. Great.
Yeah.
Last thing, check, we're done. Great,
Yeah, that
All
was
right.
easy. Yeah,
great. Thank you, Ally.
yeah.
All right, with that, are you all ready to adjourn? I know I am. All right, thanks. Great work, everybody.